he's sort of laid out what he thinks caused it, and it's definitely not his policies, as I say. And here's how he explained what brought us here. This is soundbite 2.
I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority. But first, I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are 2 leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. These supply challenges have been further hampered by the onset of Delta and Omicron viruses. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. So
the pandemic, including Omicron and Delta, and Putin, the pandemic and Putin, that's what got us to 8%. I mean, you say that his own policies and his spending added at least 3 percentage points of that 8. What of the claim that the pandemic and Putin jacked up these numbers?
Well, the Biden administration is still pushing policies that actually would make inflation somewhat higher. So they've kept on the tariffs on goods and services from China. That's been a mistake. There's finally talk of getting rid of them. And they want to forgive student loans on some basis. That's going to fuel spending in the economy. It's a transfer from poorer people to wealthier college-educated people. It's a terrible policy. Even most Democratic economists don't support it. So they say inflation is the number one priority. But when you look at the actual actions, it's pleasing their own interest groups.
And what about gas hikes? Because that's always been an issue that drives votes. People care about what's happening at the pump. And the numbers are just dreadful. As I said, a record high yesterday. And he's blaming those too on Putin. Here's soundbite 11.
Let me start with the Putin price hike, high gas prices and energy prices. I led the world and other countries to join with us to coordinate the largest release of oil from our stockpiles of all the countries in history, 240 million barrels to boost global supply. U.S. oil and gas production is approaching record levels. Under the Republican plan, they'd be allowed to continue to sit on this land without producing while shipping record profits back to their investors. Republicans would offer plenty of blame, but not a single solution to actually bring down the energy prices.
Because he's now saying, I'm going to press these oil producers to actually use all the leases and so on. Meanwhile, that at best will provide relief in years. That's not something you can just turn the spigot on overnight. And this is a reversal because he's really been threatening most of these oil and gas producers that he wants to cut off their energy supply. He doesn't believe in it as a source. So, putting that piece of it to the side, because what he's saying is I've basically released 1 million barrels of oil, but we consume 20 million a day, and that maybe shifted the gas price down by a few pennies in April, but we're still, here we are May 11th, and we're at record numbers, and it just feels like no one's leveling with us about why those numbers are as big as they are and when and what might make them come down.
That's all bad news, but I actually have a much bigger worry, and that's the prices of food and shelter, which in the latest inflation report show inflation rates much higher than what we had been expecting. And prices for shelter tend to be quite sticky. The good thing about gas prices is they can fall very quickly, just as they can go up very quickly. And the U.S. has enough fossil fuels. I feel within 6 months we'll more or less have solved that problem. But the actual longer-term burden facing voters, consumers, is paying for food, paying rent. That's not going to get better anytime soon.
Why?
Over the last year, the Federal Reserve increased M2, that's a measure of the money supply, by about 40%. The money supply fuels inflationary pressures. Our government spent like crazy. The message given to people was spend, 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 stimulus like there's no tomorrow. Inflationary expectations went up. There's been more money to spend. And we had 8.3% inflation in the report released this morning.
Right, down from 8.6, which is already dreadfully high. The Biden administration continues to change in its explanations of what brought us here. As you heard there today, he says it was the pandemic and it was Putin. But for months now, we've been watching the inflationary numbers tick up. bit by bit. And even before they did, you had a lot of Republicans, I have to say, warning, it's going to go up. You cannot spend like this, like we did with all the stimulus spending during the pandemic. And then President Biden in his infrastructure plan with still more spending. And then he wanted to spend another $2 trillion in addition to this, which got shut down thanks to Joe Manchin, between $1 and $2 trillion. You cannot spend like this and not see it come back in the form of inflation. And I wanted to play some of his changing messages on inflation, his and his administration, for you to get your finger on the pulse of it. Like, what was any of it true when it was said in your view? Listen here.
I really doubt that we're going to see an inflationary cycle.
The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down.
One of the steps that we've taken as an administration is to provide a range of assistance to the American people.
As our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases.
When people go to the grocery store and a pound of meat is more expensive than it should be, we agree. That's less related to supply chain issues.
The inflation has everything to do with the supply chain. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. This year we have a second cause. Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine.
So that's quite the evolution, right? It's not going to happen. The sky's not falling. Don't worry. And then some time spent blaming the GOP, right? And then blaming the supply chain, and then blaming Putin. And now it's the pandemic and it's Putin, but it's definitely not a single policy that Joe Biden has passed. Do you believe when the Republicans were saying we are heading for inflation, and it wasn't just Republicans, some more fair-minded Democratic economists were saying the same. Do you believe he knew that was true, but he just didn't care because he wanted to get popular spending programs through?
I have known some of the Biden people. I think the economists were fully sincere in what they said. I think the problem is a lot of them spent too much time on Twitter. And since 2008, there's been this incorrect view that the government can simply print as much money as it wants and nothing bad will happen. It's as if the laws of economics had been repealed, and people started believing that. So the kinds of inflation we did in 2008, 2009 were very different than what the Trump and Biden administrations have done more recently. But people just thought it was all the same. You can't have inflation. There won't be a problem. They were fooled. I don't think they were lying to us.
Women are at a higher risk of poor sleep quality and sleep deprivation due to hormonal changes that disrupt the circadian rhythm, negatively impacting overall health. This can later lead to hot flashes and night sweats in up to 85% of women, making sleep seem impossible. And even if you put the cell phone down and turn the lights off and do all the stuff you're supposed to do, your body still needs one final trigger to let it know it's time to sleep now. This trigger is a decrease in temperature, which hacks your primal response and convinces your body that it's finally time. We heard that from our sleep expert that we had on. This is where Chili Sleep comes to the rescue. Their team helps people from all walks of life achieve better sleep. Chili Sleep makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well-being. As part of an overall scientific study conducted by Wake Forest researchers, Chili Sleep's cooling bed products were shown to significantly reduce the frequency of night sweats and the frequency of hot flashes. Head on over to chilisleep.com/MK to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Megyn Kelly listeners and only for a limited time. That's Chili, CHILI, sleep.com/MK to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.